Hello and welcome to another episode of Fire 5 at Phoenix. I am Sarah Tompsett. I'm the coach here at Phoenix Life and Wellbeing Coaching, and I'm joined today by Sarah. So this is now our second episode on the topic of the mind-body connection. It's a huge topic, and I'm really grateful to the guests that are coming in this month, because we're getting a real variety of guests in different professions, different fields, which means that there's a real variety in the topic of conversation. So I hope you enjoy today's episode. So Sarah, please introduce yourself. Tell us a little about you, who you are, what you do, and welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me to be here today. So my name's Sarah Tompsett, and I'm a kinesiologist and a coach. I've been doing this for about 3 years now. Prior to that, my career was all in HR, so very people focused. People just fascinate me. And then I had kinesiology for myself, got so hooked that I wanted to learn how to do it. And now I support people one-to-one through kinesiology and also through coaching. So really the crux of what I do is getting to the root cause of any issues that anybody's got. So whether that be health, well-being, limiting beliefs, anything like that. My absolute passion is getting to that root. I love to get in there and find out what's actually underneath it all, because if we can do that, then we can just build it all back up again.
I think that's one of the things that I was talking about with Paul, who was the last guest on this topic, of how important it is to get to the cause of the problem and not just mask it or treat it with medication or sort of that therapy. And I think that's what I enjoy about coaching, is peeling back those layers of why people think the way they think, why they believe the way they believe, all of those things, and keep hold of what is working for them and kind of really grow that, and then start to look at what they want to remove or change to help them to move forward. So I love that you do the same thing in a slightly different way. And I think this was the other thing that we were talking about yesterday, was that that the fascination over how the mind and body connect. So I'm really enjoying this topic, and I am intrigued as to what questions you have today and where the conversation will go. So
exciting.
I am ready.
Okay, so I've got them all written down, so excuse me for just looking down as I read them off. So my first question was a bit philosophical. What do you think we can learn about the human experience from the mind-body connection?
That is a good question. What can we learn?
So what can we learn about ourselves and us here having this experience from understanding how the mind-body works as an integrated system?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because we all have different experiences. So what we would take away from that would be very different. I think the wake up bit for me was when I started strength training. So I'd take you back a little bit, but I think the bit that for me that made me really open my eyes to how much the mind and body is connected was when I was strength training. And just in terms of that, really having to tap into that mindset of believing it was possible, of knowing that that repetition of I can do this and I can make this happen, going into that sort of physical training environment. And so really tapping into the mindset before tapping into the physical strength, and building my mental strength and resilience through that. And I think over that period of years, what I found was that although my focus was on physical training, physical strength training, that actually my mental strength, my mental resilience, and my mindset was growing all the time alongside it. And so although I was getting stronger in the gym, what I found was that I was getting just so much more resilient outside of the gym, and my confidence, my self-esteem, that mindset of, just really challenging that inner chatter of, hearing those self-limiting beliefs pop up and going, yes, you bloody well can. Stop having that conversation. That's not going to help you. And also just that transference of, if you can do that in the gym, if you can throw that around, or run around this distance, or challenge yourself to do this in that environment, you can speak up in a meeting. You can voice your opinion with your peers or your supervisors. You can go for that promotion, or you can go for that opportunity. So I think that's probably, I don't know whether that answers the question, but I think that's what sprang to mind for me. Was that's when I really started to notice that you can focus on your physical strength and ability, but actually it challenges and grows your mental strength and ability at the same time.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's kind of where I was going myself when I came up with the question, and I thought, actually, what's really powerful, and what I see with clients in kinesiology particularly, they often come when they're at a point where it feels like there's no return. They've been to the doctor, they've tried to get answers for what's happening, and they're getting nowhere. And when they understand the what's the word? I suppose the power that they have, the empowerment that I can share with them, that actually you have, your body knows what to do. You have the ability to heal this. That's when I think it's like, wow, like these human bodies that we're in are actually amazing. So yeah, I think the same. It's sort of like, for me, I think as humans, what we can understand and then learn from the fact that now, I mean, we've got decades, haven't we, of information now about proof of the mind body being connected. And I think once we can accept that and go, my God, that's actually what can we create? Like, the possibilities are endless, aren't they? If we can control the monkey mind and turn off that kind of little ego in the background, then you know, the possibilities are limitless for anything, from the training like you've just described to health, to you know, pursuing our dreams and actually getting where we want to get in life. So yeah, and
I think it's that. I think for me, it's, you know, when you talk about the mindset being a muscle, when you talk about how, you know, we build the neurological pathways of what we want to create and how we can control that. And, you know, and I think, you know, I think this was part of the conversation with Paul yesterday. I think we are accepting now that we can control the physical build, the physical strength, the physical state. I think we haven't even really begun to tap into what we can do with the brain and with mindset. And it fascinates me. And I'm so open to hearing what is possible. I think, you know, sort of methodologies, the way, you know, that you work, and hypnotherapy and all of these other they're not new therapies, but they're new to us therapies. You know, there's other parts of the world that have been using this for a long time, but I think for us, the Western world, for the UK, this is still feels very new. And I think there's just so much out there that actually that sort of Western medicine is, you know, and I think this is what we were talking about yesterday, is, you know, it's not to be dismissed, but there are so many alternatives that actually are incredibly powerful. And there's more and more evidence coming through, isn't there, of how they are, you know, how they do what, you know, that what functional medicine is doing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and I think it's just that holistic approach, isn't it? Where instead of just looking at the physical symptom that's presenting and trying to stop that, to give more comfort to the person, actually, let's just take that step back and look at the human as a holistic, integrated system of emotions, of physical things, of energy, of the chemical aspects, you know, like the food we eat, the electromagnetic fields around us. You know, we are energy, everything affects us, but to try and look at one of those things on its own, I think we miss so much.
It's like lifting the bonnet of the car and only looking at the actual engine and not all of the other things that keep it ticking over, isn't it? So
it is. And I think inevitably, if you're just looking at the physical, you will miss so many things that it will come back. You know, you might get rid of it for a little while, but it will come back again because you haven't actually fixed the root. Obviously, if you've broken your arm, then that's slightly different, isn't it? But if you've got a chronic condition, then that's unlikely to go away unless you actually look at, well, how did I get to this in the first place? Yeah, and that's how I got into kinesiology, because I was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition, and that that's so complex. That's not just a case of, right, your body's just decided to attack itself. That is so much more complex. So I was offered medication, and at the time I said no, I'm going to go and research into it. Fascinating. Many rabbit holes later, I managed to put together a little picture of what might have happened and how this might have happened to me. And that is, I believe, what helped me heal. If I'd have just taken the medication, then, well, what would I have learned? And actually, how would I now be able to help other people? So I think, there's a purpose to all of these things, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. and there's so many elements of my journey and my experiences that have led me here to, because I have gone down the rabbit hole of why and why is that? And the intrigue and the curiosity has, instead of accepting what was on offer of, okay, what are the alternatives? What else can I do? How else can I approach this? What else is possible? And to look at other elements and other ways of approaching, to look and just peel back the layers and go, what is going on? What is going on under the bonnet? I don't just want to kind of stop the car, let it cool down, and then start off again. If there's smoke coming out from it or steam coming out from under the bonnet, I want to lift it up. I want to know why. Exactly. I don't just want to pull over, wait till it stops, and then start again, because I'm not going to get very far. So the why and the curiosity, the rabbit holes.
One of my little mantras is always like, question everything. Like, don't accept if it resonates as truth, fine. If it doesn't, then find out what does, because you'll uncover other things.
And I think this is why I was drawn more to social sciences rather than maths and other sciences, because I was always, why? And they're like, just because it is, Zoe, that's the formula and that's just what it is. And I'm like, I need to understand why. Yeah.
One of my mum's favourite comments about me as a child was, you always want to know the ins and outs of everything. Yes, I do.
Yes, I do.
It's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Great first question. Yeah, I can see that I'm going to have answers to that question popping up in my head.
Maybe I should have ended with that. It's quite a deep one, isn't it?
This is exactly why I don't like the questions in advance, because I would have been thinking about that for a long time. So at least
I don't think there's a wrong or right, is there? It's what we take from it, because when I say, like, you're learning about the human experience, we all experience this differently as well. So it's just myriad of answers, really. So my next question is, what telltale signs would you look for to associate somebody's mind-body connection being out of balance? What would give you that kind of, I think there's something a bit out there?
I think to put it into context for me in coaching, I will quite often look at what people are telling me to what they are telling me. And sometimes there's a disconnect there. So sometimes, you get that very sort of cognitive answer that might be the answer that they have been used to giving, that's their answer, their go-to answer for that kind of question. But I'll look at what their hands are telling me, what's their body language telling me, what's the facial expressions telling me, what does the silence tell me, and I look for the disconnect in that sense. It's, I think it is that mind-body connection, and sometimes the body does a lot of talking, that verbally there's that disconnect there. When people are describing things, sometimes they'll point to somewhere in their body as they're describing how they feel about something. So they'll describe it in words, but they actually will put their hand over somewhere. I'm like, okay, what does it feel like? Or they'll hold their stomach as they're talking about something, or there's just that connection, isn't there? That there's a physical feel to the thoughts and the mindset and the process that is going through. So that's the disconnect that I look for, that to read the whole answer, not just the verbal answer. Because we're very used to explaining things, aren't we? Going into our heads and trying to give that sort of more logical answer, whereas sometimes that more physical or emotional answer is explained in a different way. It's also why I quite like to work with analogies or metaphors and descriptions rather than words, because it helps people to come out of their heads and describe something that also helps me to understand what they're going through. So I might not be able to understand what anxiety feels like for that person, but if they say to me it's like a typhoon that just sweeps everything in and makes everything so much bigger and blurred and I can't make sense of it, that I can understand.
Yeah.
So sometimes working with metaphors or analogies really helps me to understand what that person is experiencing, whether it's that sort of mental, emotional, physical experience, without that sort of logical explanation. And sometimes, you know, certainly if people are talking through an uncomfortable or perhaps even more traumatic experience, working with a metaphor means they don't need to talk about what they're talking about. They can talk about how they feel about it, and we can work with that without them having to describe that experience and relive that trauma. So it's a huge benefit. And so I know that our worlds are slightly different in what you would, you know, how you would approach that, but that's the disconnect that I look for, or where there might be signs that it's not connecting. I mean, the other, quite often people will tell me that they feel out of balance. They just come straight out and say, you know, things are not in balance, and they'll talk about physical ways that that's coming through, or they'll talk about, you know, the stress and more emotional ways that that comes through. So the more sort of talking therapy side of coaching is that people will just explain it and talk it through and tell you where things feel out of balance, and then that's where we can then start that conversation of, okay, what would you like it to look like, how would you like it to feel, okay, and how can we then make that happen.
It's interesting, because I guess, like with coaching, that's a similar approach that I would take. With kinesiology, I've got the amazing tool of muscle testing, so the body never lies. So if you know, for example, if I'm normally, people will come and for a physical thing. So let's take a skin issue, for example. So it could be eczema or psoriasis, or suddenly they've got this rash and they don't know where it's come from. They will come wanting that to be fixed, basically. But as I mentioned before, there's always an emotional component, and you know, there could even be a food issue. We don't know yet. But if I start talking to them about emotions and what might be irritating them, you know, or I find out that actually that skin lesion is linked to the liver meridian, for example. So liver being where we would hold anger, frustration. So it might be, well, what's really annoying you at the moment? They might describe something that happened 5 years ago, and they'll say, well, I'm not really thinking about that at the moment. That's gone now. And I'll say, well, let's just muscle test just to see whether it's still held in your body. And invariably it is. And they'll go, well, I'm not thinking about that. So it's just kind of explaining to them then that whilst in our minds we think we've got over it, our bodies are holding on to that sort of vibration, if you like. Our cells hold that trauma. And it's that with kinesiology and the techniques then that we can help the body to release. But it is quite funny when they think that they're over it just because they put it in the back of their heads.
It's still in there.
The body's loved it.
And that's the thing, isn't it? It's still in there. And whether it's, you know, from a coaching perspective of talking it through and working it through that way, or whether it's, you know, from the kinesiology element of helping to identify that that's where it is and that's what it might be, and moving it forward in different ways is just incredibly powerful, isn't it? But I think just because it's not in the front of your mind, it doesn't mean the back of your mind is still in your mind, and it is how it comes through.
It is, and sometimes that can take a couple of years, you know. It might be, one of the things I will ask people is, well, what was happening about 2 years ago? And when they start to describe it, then they kind of go, well, but that was 2 years ago. And like, well, let's just see if it's relevant. And it you know, it can take that long for the body to show it as a physical symptom. So it's incredible.
Interesting. And so just the reason why this has popped into my head is because I had this conversation with somebody fairly recently. So in my teens, I really struggled with tonsillitis. So when I was stressed, run down, overwhelmed, it would come. I had tonsillitis like once a month, and it was just kept popping back up. Then that stopped in my early 20s, and I started to get ear infections instead. And then that stopped into my late 20s, and I just haven't had an ear infection, touch wood, haven't had an ear infection for years. I haven't had tonsillitis for years. Yeah, I then started to get cold sores. And then they have just stopped. And now I get this very random rash.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So just picking up on what you're saying there. Now I know that it's not even necessarily the feelings of stress, because but I know that I'm putting my body under stress. So, I know that for me, I need to get to bed a little bit earlier. I need to slow the pace down of what I'm doing in the week. I need to clear some of the stuff out the calendar and take some time out. And I just need to slow down, eat better, and get more sleep. And then that normally is enough to rectify things and put things back into place. But it's just really interesting how it just seems to be moving around. And
that is interesting.
That is really interesting. I apologize for people listening of having to hear my ailments. It's very, very, very strange how it's all the same underlying reason. It just comes through in different ways.
But
and
that's
it would be
great.
easy for me to say, oh, it's just this. But if you just put it down to something else and you don't deal with the root cause, it's just going to keep coming up in different ways, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think, if anything like that happens to me, because like you, I had tonsillitis regularly as well through my teens, a couple of quincies thrown in as well. And just constantly avoiding that final amount that I'd have to be referred for surgery. So it just somehow miraculously, I wouldn't get that 7th bout that would make me have to have my tonsils out, thank God. But it's really weird, because now if the same as you, if I'm doing too much, if I'm starting to get run down, the first thing I get is like a little sore throat. And I know it's not tonsillitis. I know it's my body saying, just stop a minute, just rest. So and sometimes I need that little push from my body, because my head will just carry on, whereas my body's going, no, stop.
It's like that tap, 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 isn't it? Of Zoe, what are you doing? Time to slow down.
And I love that quote, which is I can't remember who said it, but if you don't listen to your body's whispers, they will turn into screams, basically. So I remember that. It's like, right, okay, I've got a tiny sore throat. I'm going to do something now before it turns into something, worse.
Yeah. People always laugh when I say I set an alarm for bed. But it gets me to bed. For me, it's that wind down time of, you've got an hour left before you need to be in bed, resting, ready to go off to sleep. So this is your last hour to get anything that needs to be done.
Definitely.
And then that wind down.
And a few of the things that you described there, certainly with the tonsils and the cold sores, things like that, all immune based. So the immune system needs sleep. It's that simple, isn't it? Yeah. But we don't often. Well, we're listening now because we paid the price before. We're not.
It's taken me until many years to work that out. But we got there in the end.
We got there. Right, I've got my next question now.
Yeah.
Kind of linked to the last year in a way, in that we're in this sort of climate of, there's lots of uncertainty, there's lots of lack of control, I guess, over the future. Whereas before we could pretty much plan stuff and it would happen. We don't know what we're allowed to do and not, and the lack of connection in terms of physical side of things. What practices have you found helpful to manage your stress and remain positive? And I realise some of that you might have just answered, but what types of things have you found useful?
So I'm an introvert. So actually being on my own and closed away from people hasn't been an issue for me. But I have seen, friends and family that have really found that a challenge. I had a conversation with somebody this morning about hugging and how people are just really excited about going out to hug people. I've already found a t-shirt that says "I don't hug."
Yes, don't get overexcited.
Yeah, it's been an interesting time. My son likes his own space as well, so just being at home has been okay. I think the biggest challenge for me has been not allowing work to fill all of the gaps that have been created by the restrictions, and I think that's been the bigger challenge for me, and also not changing for the sake of change. So I'm an introvert, quite happy to be on my own, but I also quite enjoy, probably isn't the right word, but I'm quite comfortable in chaos and disruption. So I'm comfortable with not knowing. I'm comfortable with the unplanned. I have, we've obviously talked about this in lots of different perspectives over the last sort of 12, 18 months. I think my background in the police puts you in a very good position to be able to deal with the unexpected and deal with the unplanned. So I actually, I would say that I thrive in chaos and disruption. So, last year it's like roll the sleeves up, right, what can we do with this? What are the opportunities here? So actually not doing something, actually being consistent and stable and calm for people in that period was really important. I think the biggest challenge for me was not allowing work to fill all of the gaps and finding other ways to be physically active when I couldn't have a gym class. And I very much structure my routine around the things that are important to me. So very lucky being self-employed, you get to choose your own routine. And I have worked to build a routine around the things that I enjoy doing, and then I work around that. So when those went, because I couldn't do them, so I couldn't go to gym classes, or I couldn't go and see people, or I couldn't go watch basketball, that created lots of gaps in the calendar, which were very easy to just fill with work. So I had to make a real conscious effort of, even though there wasn't a class to go to, of still having something in the calendar that said this is the time to go for a walk, or this is the time to go and exercise. Still block out times of not working time and go and find something else to do. The novelty of that, it was great at the beginning, wasn't it? Because the weather was amazing this time. It was like sit and read a book and go for a walk, and by sort of summer it's like, okay, the novelty of either working or housework started to wear off. So it's been quite nice being able to start to book those things in, but I know that I need to be physically active because I'm sitting here a lot of the time. So still making space for that and trying to keep some kind of routine was really important, but not much else changed. We were very fortunate. I think it's been very disruptive for a lot of people and a lot of people in their businesses. I was already online. So I was already online because of just being able to coach wider than the local area, but also so I could travel. I haven't been able to travel, but it did mean that the business was able to continue as it was. So I'm very fortunate. It's not felt like a huge period of change. There's been some adaptations, but I think when I see what other people, homeschooling and changing their business model, and having 2 people working from home and children homeschooling, I haven't had to do that. And I've not been able to see family and friends. I've not been able to go to gym classes, but we've connected in other ways, and I've exercised and been active in other ways, and it will return. So just incredibly grateful that family and friends are all through this still in good health. And actually in the grand scheme of things, it's that bigger picture, isn't it, of we've come through this largely unaffected. There has been an impact, but in the grand scheme of things, largely unaffected, and incredibly grateful for that.
So essentially, I guess for you, it was around setting your own boundaries for making sure that you made time to do the bits that that would take you away from work and give you that more holistic lifestyle, I guess.
Yeah, I've read
in things.
Yeah, read a ridiculous actually, but both fiction books and some sort of self-development non-fiction as well. So I think it's just an adaptation of, you know, one of the things that I talked about very early on when the first lockdown happened was put a blog and a video out to say to people, okay, what needs can you not meet because of the restrictions, and how can you meet them in a different way with the restrictions? And I think people who did that very early on adapted quite quickly. And I think for other people not knowing, you know, talking about connection, you know, if I can go and still see friends, why does it still not feel like I'm connecting with people? Well, is that because you need physical touch? You need to be able to hug people to feel the connection, and you don't get that at a 2-meter distance. If you don't know that that's why it doesn't feel the same, then it's very difficult to understand, how can I do that? How can I meet that in a different way?
Definitely. And I found a lot of the people that, because there was a period where I couldn't work because the government said, obviously, no close contact services. And then there was a part when I could, the second lockdown, I could for part of it until February. And then between February and April, I couldn't. But when I was seeing people, the massive thing that came up for me was just this lack of control, like, you know, and actually just not feeling like they had a purpose to life anymore. Diaries were empty, and it just felt, you know, no holidays were being booked in, and there was nowhere to take the kids at the weekend, and, you know, that sort of thing. So, and through the winter period especially, because you can't just go to the park with your small children, can you? Because it's raining and it's horrible, and they can't have a swing anyway because it's soaking wet. So those were so that was quite hard, I think, for, I'd say particularly for the mums with small children, just that whole, well, what are we doing? Because it just feels like we're just waiting. We're waiting to be told what we can do next. And so the lack of control
element has been, I think, significant for a lot of people. And I think a lot of coaching conversations that I've been having have been about zooming into what is in your control. Okay, you know, there's a huge amount that you don't know. There's a huge amount that you can't control. So just really tunnel vision, kind of magnify in on what you can control, what's important to you. But I think it's really interesting at the moment, the number of people that are looking at career change.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
Life changes.
Yes.
And I think you talk about living with purpose. How many people prior to this had a job that they went to work and then they just got through it until the next holiday? And it's like, now you don't have a holiday. So what are you working for? You can't go out and spend the money that you're earning. So what are you working for? You can't work in the way that you would normally work. So what are you working for? So that real purpose, I think, has a lot of people have really had that time to reflect, or the disruption has created that space or created a situation where they've really had to reflect on, okay, well, what am I doing here? And the number of calls I've had, like inquiry calls, where people have just said, I need some direction. I don't know what I'm doing with life. And I'm hearing that a lot at the moment.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think for some people the disruption was actually a gift, and it certainly for me, you know, I realized that, why aren't I using more of my HR background during lockdown? Well, I don't know why I wasn't. I just wasn't. So much so that now I've written a group coaching program which launches at the beginning of June. And it's like, well, why wasn't I doing that before? And I wasn't doing it because I was just on that path. And actually stopping made me realize, oh my God, I really missed that. Why can't I bring that in? So, you know, I think in many ways, it, like you say, I think that so many people talk to me about relocations, moving to the countryside, moving to the seaside, wanting to do different jobs, always wanted to start their own business, but never thought they could. So lots and lots of change, I think, will come on the back of this in a positive way. And I think many people don't necessarily want to go back to what we consider to be normal, because life was so stressful.
I think there's a lot of people now that have quite enjoyed lockdown, or
Yes.
they've enjoyed some of the changes or elements of some of the changes, and now the reality of having to go back to what was before is now creating that, okay, this is not what I want. There's elements here that are now not negotiable. They might have been negotiable before. There might have been something that outweighed the commute or outweighed the number of hours working. But that's not, the priorities have shifted, the values have shifted, or the values may not have shifted, but I think the values have been highlighted of, okay, this is what's really important to me. And the life that I am now potentially mapped to go back into is not what I want. It's not in alignment with what's important to me.
And then that's going to result in unhappiness, resentment, frustration, all of those things that will eventually have an impact on the physical body.
Yes.
That whole mind-body connection, won't it?
Yeah.
So, which leads nicely to my next question.
Excellent.
So what examples, so kind of two parts. What examples can you share of where your thoughts and beliefs have affected your physical health? And then conversely, how food, exercise, sleep, etc. has impacted your mental health?
Ooh. I think the second one's probably an easier question to answer. Let's start with the second one first. Repeat the last bit. The last bit
was what examples have you got of how food, exercise, sleep, those kind of Rangan Chatterjee's 4 pillars of health, how have they impacted your mental health?
So I was saying to Paul in the last episode that I've got ulcerative colitis. I apologise, people, for just giving you a full rundown of my medical history. I do think it's important for people to understand that there's stuff that we're all working on.
Really,
But progress. But for me, looking after the physical elements, when you get a flare up with ulcerative colitis, as you do with any illness, it drags you down mentally, and it also restricts in terms of what you're able to do. So I know that I start with the physical health, which means then the just energy levels and the kind of the mood to want to be able to do things has a huge impact. And I have been, I really have to prioritize that time for activity, because I have a sedentary job. It's very easy for me to sit here for a good proportion of the day, so that I need to make sure that I have that time for physical activity, and I try and vary that, because different activity has a different impact on how I feel. A cardio, a run or a spin session energizes in a very different way to a weight session. So I like to do both, and sometimes I will decide how much energy I feel I have and go and do a workout, and that produces a different amount of energy or a different feeling of energy as a result. But I know that if I don't exercise, if I'm not active, I'm so grumpy. And lack of sleep, I'm horrible when I haven't had enough sleep. It's Ramadan at the moment, so my son is getting up through the night to eat through the night, because then he can't eat daylight. And interesting, it's not me, but watching him, changing his eating habits, not eating, not drinking during the day, of just watching his energy levels kind of go. And just, he came home for a nap earlier because he's got training this afternoon. So he's done college and training without any hydration, without any food, of just watching him, his energy drop. But mentally, this period of Ramadan for him, it impacts him in a very different way, which probably only he can best describe. But that the fasting and the elements of what it is for him has that mental clarity for him, and that focus. And there's lots of things that he does in this month that he doesn't do the rest of the time, like reading, research, that kind of thing. So that's really interesting. So I think I have have to prioritize my
Yes.
physical health, nutrition, to be able to, you know, to just focus and be able to do the job that I do, and, you know, really have that mental energy, because it's not a physical job, but it is a mental job, and it is an emotional job in terms of just really being able to connect and tune in with people, and that, you know, that having that step away activity, food, headspace is all really important for me to be able to do that. So that was the second bit, I think. What was the first
bit was around where you might have examples of where any thoughts or beliefs have ended up affecting your physical health. So you've seen it sort of impact down the line.
It's a great question. I'm just really trying to think back. And I know, you know, there's been, you know, times that mentally have been a real challenge, like the mental emotional health has definitely not been great. And interestingly, if I look at my physical health at that time, was probably the worst that it's ever been in my timeline, if you like. I don't know that I made the connection at the time, to be honest. I think
interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting looking back on it now of you know, what is it, a chicken and egg situation, isn't it, of what came on first. But I do think that it was, you know, the fact that my, you know, the headspace that I was in meant that actually eating well, activity was definitely not a priority. And interestingly, I think that actually weight gain and staying at home, not going out, not doing anything it's a way of, for me, I think was a way of hiding from the world a little bit, of, you know, not wanting to go out and engage. So I think there was definitely, you know, I don't think I would have described as being physically unwell. I didn't go to a doctor in any of that time. Was I in good physical health? No. Was I in good mental or emotional health? Also no. So I think it's only really now, isn't it, when you realise how you can feel, that you realise how much of an impact it can have.
Yeah, and I think that's when it makes it easier when you've been through that cycle, because I think it becomes like a cycle, doesn't it? Whichever is the chicken and whichever is the egg, it constantly flips. So, and unless you can get off that train and kind of go, right, okay, let me step back. These are the tiny little baby steps I need to put in. I'll try going to bed earlier. I'll try cutting this out of my diet. I'll try this. I'll try that. When you start feeling better, you know that those things are having an impact. So like now, if you get a cold sore or I start getting a little sore throat, we know, right, stop, because that's our little sign now. So we're not going to let it go any further, because that is the sign. But I see it in kinesiology clients when, so particularly with anxiety, quite often there are stomach issues going on as well. And if you think, like, when we feel anxious, where do we feel it? We feel it in our stomach. And when I ask, so you can ask the body with kinesiology, is this the physical realm, emotional realm, chemical, or energetic? Often it's all of them. Sometimes it's a few, and sometimes it's just one. And quite often with anxiety, it's one, and it's emotional. That's not everybody. I'm not, you know, I don't want to tar everybody with the same sort of brush, because we're all unique. But if I was to describe a pattern, that I do see that a lot. So they've got physical issues, but the actual root of it is an emotional thing. So by fixing and healing the emotional, the physical will disappear, and it's amazing. So, you know,
isn't it interesting how most of us focus on the physical, hoping that the emotional will feel better as a result, rather than the other way around. And I was exactly the same when I looked at, you know, my first response, you know, first kind of taking action, taking ownership of the physical, the health I was in general, was, okay, let's just tackle the weight gain first. Let's tackle, you know, sorting myself out, getting, you know, eating properly, you know, exercising. Let's work on the physical health, because the whole headspace, mental and emotional health, was in a proper pickle. So it was a lot easier. It's a lot tangible, isn't it? The tangible steps to work on physical health, and hope that everything would just nicely kind of just sort itself out in the background. And it wasn't really until probably a year, 2 years on, and physically I looked very different, but headspace was still very much in the old world. And I thought, okay, this isn't going to sort itself out. And so I'm going to have to kind of put some focus and some energy into it. So
I think that's it. And I think sometimes a lot of people that I see, they just want to know what they can do. What can they do to help themselves? And I think the physical things are easier because we can, to an extent, control what we eat. We decide what we put in our mouths. We decide, if we know that we are sensitive to gluten, we can choose whether to have it or not. If we have it and then we're running to the bathroom every 5 minutes, well, that's our choice, isn't it? But we've still got a choice. We can stop having it, and then that won't happen. Or wheat or whatever it is. So it's almost easier. Whereas I think the head stuff sometimes is a bit like, I'm not going there. That's a bit.
The physical's much more logical, isn't it?
Yes.
If I eat this, I will feel this. Whereas the emotional.
You can Google it, problem solution. Whereas like when it's emotional, and I think I'm one of those people that I don't mind going deep with myself with emotional stuff as well as with clients. I mean, that's how I think I've probably managed to move on as far as I have with the autoimmunity, because I'm like, I'm going to dig deep into those ugly, dark parts, because that's where the secret's at. I'm going to go there. But I think a lot of people don't want to do that, and so they'll do it holding somebody's hand, which is obviously where people like you and me come in, isn't it? Because we can help them, but they don't necessarily want to go there themselves. So the empowerment is the physical stuff then, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which will have an impact on the mental down the line. Right, last question.
Yeah.
So have you ever read any of Gabor Mate's books?
No, I've not heard of that either.
So he's one of his books is called The Body Holds the Score. And it's actually, I might have got that wrong. That might be somebody else. Anyway, I've just got in my head that could be the guy called Bezel, somebody.
Okay, no, I've not heard
anyway,
it.
This quote from him is a really good example of the mind-body connection. And I just wondered what your perception was of the quote. So here it is. If you don't know how to say no, your body will say it through physical illness. Yeah. So it's like, if you don't say no, your body's going to stop you at something.
Yeah.
It's going to give you something which we have actually both described, if I think about it.
Yeah, I think we have.
Yeah.
And you talk about, the engine, and it came up with Paul in the last episode about how eventually you can ignore it. You can ignore the warning light, but eventually it will come through. And I think this is definitely the mind-body connection, is the if you are struggling with something mental and emotional, it will play out physically, whether it's migraines, whether it's skin, whether it's shoulder tension, which then is in your neck and your back, whether it's lower back pain, it will come through. And ultimately, if it then impacts your sleep, then that's going to impact your immune system.
Exactly.
It all just
then you're going to get lower, you're going to pick stuff up, exactly. Yeah.
And I think the more how often do you hear people say, I don't know what it is, but I just don't feel right?
Exactly. Something's not right.
Something's not right. I don't know what it is. It's not something in particular. I don't feel something in particular, but I know I just don't feel 100%. I don't feel right.
Yeah. I hear I don't feel like me.
Yeah.
They just want me back. I remember the name of the book. It's When the Body Says No.
Okay.
But the other book's good as well. Similar things, like the body just remembers everything basically, and it is connected. I think as well, what's fascinating with kinesiology is, if there is, so say somebody's got a shoulder problem, and I'm testing shoulder muscles, there are certain meridians, which are the energy pathways in the body. So talking more like the Eastern medicine aspect of it, they link to the muscles. So say there's a shoulder issue, but that shoulder issue is linked to the stomach, for example, then I know that that's actually, we're going to go back to the stomach, but also what are the emotions around stomach? So then we can start to pinpoint exactly what's going on with the holistic picture by which muscle is out of balance. Wow. So it's really clever. Like the body just so knows what's going on. So I always say to people, you might not know, but your body knows, and that's what we're going to trust. Your body knows exactly.
Do you find that people come to you quite skeptical and then kind of, wow, that's like, just
I think
start to happen?
Yeah, I mean, now most of my clients are word of mouth. So by the time they come, they've already heard about it. They've got friends or family that have been. So they understand. They probably even mostly know what a muscle test is and what it feels like. But even still, when they're lying on the couch and, I'll go back to that example of they think something's gone and they've forgotten it. And we talk about it and they'll go, oh my God, like what just happened there? Like that. Or if I put so I use batch flower remedies to support emotions. So if I put one of those on to try and find the one that their body needs, and then it goes weak or strong, and we'll pick it up and I'll go, right, that's that, and it's for this. And they haven't told me the emotion, they'll go, oh my God, that's just spot on. How do you know that? And I say, I don't. Your body knows that.
Yeah.
I'm just translating, but your body's telling me exactly what's going on. And that's the other amazing thing. Something that you talked about earlier with your clients, when they don't necessarily need to tell you because you can look at their body language. Mm-hmm. What I find amazing with this, particularly working with teenagers, when they don't want to talk to anybody, let alone somebody who they don't know. They don't have to tell me what's happened. They can just think of it, and we can muscle test while they're thinking of it. And that's enough. Then we don't have to dwell on it. We don't have to pull it all apart and examine it and go through it all again. It's literally, if they can just connect with that feeling of what happened without saying a word, and we muscle test, if it's relevant, the body will pick it up. So it's amazing. Yeah,
it's incredible. I mean, it's not in that, in that similar vein, when we talk about, that your brain doesn't know the difference between fact and fiction, reality and what you're telling it. So when you think that you're worrying about something that isn't real right now, it might that will create that physical response.
Yes,
where your body is getting ready for that fight, flight, freeze. And I think it's just, I think sometimes it's just that there's certain things that people accept that is now generally accepted, isn't it? Like, okay, we know that's a thing, we know that. But then when it's like the things that you talk about, it's like that's like the next step, isn't it? And I think
I guess it does,
that place of acceptance, understanding that is still to come in general public perspective, isn't it?
Yes, and I think it is. I mean, it's been around for a number of years now, but I think it is still relatively unknown. I don't know why that is. I suppose because it's maybe feels a bit more alternative and woo-woo, I guess. I mean, to me, it is a blend of Eastern and Western. There's very much, there are structural fixes that we do as kinesiologists. We are looking at vitamin deficiencies. We are looking at food and that sort of thing, and what is impacting the body, what's draining it, what's giving it energy. But we're also looking at the energy side. We're also saying, you do have an aura, you do have chakras. We're going to look at those, and even if they don't understand, it doesn't matter, because they don't need to, really, as long as
they just want to feel better, don't they?
Yeah, they want to feel better. And as I say, by the time they normally come, unless they're already familiar with it, or their mum's been, or somebody in their family, and they're like, oh, well, go to the doctors, but also do this, let's look at it holistically. They're literally saying, help me, because I can't carry on like this. So we're just going to try whatever you say, we're going to try, because it's worth it.
This becomes more open. Well, but that's the thing, isn't it? Is when other doors close because they're not working, you look at other doors that you can open. And so I think sometimes when I was going to say traditional, but actually this is more traditional, isn't it? But when the known things,
conventional, perhaps,
when the kind of the general known steps don't work, then you start to look at the alternatives. So it's the doors, if the first door that you open works, then you don't look at the other doors, do you? So
That's
but when
right.
the other doors don't have the answers, then you become more open to what the other alternatives are.
Yeah. And really, I mean, quite simply put, kinesiology finds and removes stress in the body, because it's the stress of whatever nature has caused the issue, mental, emotional, physical, whatever it is. So that's simply all it's doing, in a very powerful way, because it's not just guessing, it's going into your energy and finding out exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
So it's, yeah.
We can talk about this for hours.
Yeah.
Really good. And
Great topic.
thank you so much. It is. I do find it really fascinating, and I'm sure that people watching and listening find the same. We will put your contact details in, because I'm sure there are people listening to this that would like to find out more, or potentially connect with you to find out more and learn from you. I appreciate, I said to you before we started that my knowledge of, well, I can't even say it, I've struggled with spelling it. Kinesiology is minimal, but it is fascinating. And my why little monkey is jumping up and down with. Don't forget to look at that book that she mentioned, just to be able to find out more. But thank you so much. It's great questions. Really had me thinking today too. So I think there'll be other alternative answers popping up, I'm sure, as the evening goes on.
Definitely.
But thank you very much. We'll put your details in. Thank you very much for watching and listening, and we'll be back with another episode very soon. But thank you, Sarah. Thank you for your time, and thank you all for joining.
Thank you.